I think we are good to go.
Sweet. Hello, everybody, and welcome. We at the USAEL are excited to kick off today's edition of the Careers in Esports webinar series.
This is episode 8 in our recurring series that aims to provide students, educators, and esports enthusiasts with a unique opportunity to explore a multitude of jobs and career pathways in esports.
That's right. And you all should know the deal by now. Every month, we talk to a different expert from the world of esports and gaming. The roster includes professional players, coaches, game developers, tournament organizers, and others to give our listeners firsthand insights and expert advice on pursuing a career in the esports industry.
Our guest list is full of industry veterans stemming from companies and organizations that have established a significant presence in the space, with Blizzard Entertainment, Riot Games, and Bungie, just to name a few.
But as usual, let's start with some introductions. I'm Rich Conti.
And I'm Peter Poliglov.
And we are your recurring hosts for the Careers in Esports series. Peter, are you excited to introduce our next guest?
Oh, absolutely. Today, we are talking to someone with lots of experience in the games and esports industry, and specifically in marketing, which is right in my wheelhouse.
So without further ado, it is my privilege to introduce to our audience, Robert Oles, a product marketing manager at Kabam Studios. Thank you for joining us today.
Awesome. Thanks for having me, guys. Excited to be here.
Some key moments from Robert's career include founding Carleton Esports at Carleton University, working as a community coordinator for Tespa, being a partnership marketing account executive for the Vancouver Titans and the Seattle Surge, working at Electronic Arts and Kabam as a brand manager, as a brand marketing associate, and present as a product marketing manager at Kabam, supporting non-IP games.
Hey, Robert, welcome. For those in the audience, can you tell us a little bit about what exactly a product marketing manager or a brand marketing associate is all about? What's kind of like the high level of each that you would say?
Yeah, for sure. So at a bunch of different companies, they might have different definitions about what a product marketing manager does. But in my role at Kabam, our job is to essentially be the eye in the sky and the big picture thinkers when it comes to campaign strategy. So if we're launching a game, for example, we're going to be bringing together all of our different teams, whether that be graphic designers, video editors, social media managers, etc., and setting the strategy that we're going to use in order to launch our game and making sure that kind of all the moving pieces come together in a cohesive way. And that's kind of like the role that we, or the way that we operate product marketing managers at Kabam.
Okay, thank you for the explanation. And speaking of gaming, that actually transfers really well into our first question.
Which is, what role has gaming played in your life and sort of where did you start?
Yeah, for sure. I think like a lot of the people that have probably been on this show, I've been gaming my entire life. It was something that I got into at a really early age, and I just loved as a way to not only like connect with my like friends and family, but also to engage in like passions that I had. So like history was a big thing for me. So games like Age of Mythology, Assassin's Creed, etc., were like a huge part of like my development. And as I got older, like gaming continued to grow with me. And then when I went to university, it was something that I had kind of like left behind at home because I was like, okay, if I bring my gaming PC to campus at university, I'm not going to talk with anybody. I'm just going to, stay in my dorm room and play with my friends from back home. So I should like push myself and get out there. But after my first year of university, I found myself like really, really missing gaming as a part of my life. And then that led me to like co-found Carleton Esports, and it led to, participating in tournaments at a very basic level. You can see the classic esports photo on the screen there. But really what drove me to continue in gaming was my love of community. And that has always kind of like come back across my life of like gaming is community to me. And it's something that, is really the real way that it's impacted my life. As obviously it's impacted my career, but even just like the people that I hang out with today, they're mostly gamers. And I just find myself coming back to the community in a bunch of different ways.
Now, would you say your parents, your family, your friends growing up supported your passion for gaming?
I I would say so. Like I was incredibly lucky. My parents, for example, were always the kind of people that said, okay, like we trust you, like follow your passions and your dreams. Um, but I definitely think that there was a little bit of hesitation when I was a lot younger about the amount of time I would spend playing video games. And I think that institutionally, we probably didn't receive as much, support as a lot of other clubs, say now at like the university level, will start to receive, or like even the fact that programs like this exist for high school students, I think is like fantastic. So yeah, I would say that my parents were rather supportive, but like institutionally, I think the culture was a little bit different for when I was like starting my career compared to where it is today.
That makes a lot of sense. I'm also curious, Robert. So you mentioned community being a big positive of gaming in your life. Have you also seen any sort of skill sets, positive skill sets that you developed as a result of either that community or gaming?
Yeah, 100%. I think for me, in terms of like specific skills that gaming has helped me learn, I think for one, like leadership and teamwork is the one that I will always come back to for games. I think it's the most natural for like a lot of people to reference. The ability to communicate quickly, to solve problems with a group, and to, develop together is something that is really, really strong. I think specifically related to marketing, I think that people who play games have a stronger understanding of like establishing narratives, which is something that I think is really, really crucial, especially for somebody who wants to work in brand or in the strategy side of things. Like being able to understand what is the story that we're telling with whatever marketing, campaign that we're doing. So if we're launching a game, okay, well, the game might have XYZ feature, but what is the fantasy that we're really going to be pitching to players, right? Like, for example, game I work on right now is called Shop Titans. It's a game where you play as an RPG shopkeeper, and you can craft things, and um, you can send adventuring parties out to like collect new materials for you. But it goes beyond that, right? Of like understanding and selling the fantasy of like starting your own business, for example, is something that like a lot of our players have resonated with, that desire to be an entrepreneur. So being able to craft that narrative within a feature set is something that I definitely contribute to, playing games as a kid, being immersed in narratives, understanding, why people play the games, because I understood why I wanted to play the games that I played.
Wow, Robert, you're like speaking my language. It's almost basically the difference between the engineering team just describing the features and what they're
Yeah.
intended to do, and then the marketing team is like, well, no, 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 but what do you get from it? What is the experience we are trying to explain? So I I get it.
Yeah, for sure. And that's always some of the most fun conversations I get to have in a day to day is like, meeting with game designers and meeting with folks on the game team and just like trying to encourage them to think that way. Cause I find a lot of times like game designers and engineers are very, they're very logical and rational, and like getting them to step out of that and, to think of it as like, what, again, like what is that fantasy that we're selling? How are we gonna, frame whatever we're doing? To players so they get really excited and hyped about the game that we're making.
Yeah, absolutely. We'll funnel over into our next question right here. So, why did you first choose to pursue a career in marketing and game and esports marketing specifically?
Yeah, for sure. I think as a kid, I always enjoyed the idea of marketing. I knew that I loved solving problems and I knew that I loved being creative, but I also knew that like I wasn't great at art, I didn't do well in that field, and I also wasn't good at, math, and I loved games. So programming was off the table, and visual art in terms of like 3D modeling or, stuff like that, or graphic design, for example, was off the table. But I still wanted to be involved in that world. I still wanted to be involved in that community. So marketing was like a natural fit for me in terms of like where my interests lie. But to be fully honest, like I was not intending to go into games because I just didn't know that there were opportunities. Like like I never thought about it, right? Like when I feel like a lot of people when they think about careers in games, they think, oh, like a game designer or a software engineer or an artist. I didn't think about the broader, you know, um, careers that were out there, including marketing. So when I originally went to school, like I was studying public affairs to go work in government. And it was through my work at, Carleton Esports at the time, which was called Tespa Carleton, where, I really started to realize like, hey, wait a minute, there's a broader world out there and I really enjoy this. I seem to be good at it. And I want to try and make this a career. And Tespa was really that first stepping stone, and getting involved in a larger network was that first stepping stone for me to really experience that world and recognize that it was an option for me.
That's awesome. Yeah, and you mentioned that you started that team initially for that sense of community at your school.
Yeah, for sure. So, when I approached, starting Carleton Esports, I had a co-founder with me, and he was way more minded around esports. Like he was, a lot more involved in the competitive aspect of things. He had played Heroes of the Dorm, which is a Heroes of the Storm tournament. And he was really, really great at that. And for me, like I wasn't as focused on esports. I enjoyed watching esports. I enjoyed participating in it. But for me, what really motivated me was that community. I wanted to create a space on campus in which players, like students, can come together over their shared passion for what they're doing. Because I felt like as a first year, the year before, that like I didn't have that space. There was no opportunity for me to meet with other people that were interested in gaming, which I thought was like a really limiting experience. So that was originally what got me into it. Yeah, it was the community aspect.
Absolutely. And we'll jump over into our next question here.
Our
You want
next
to
one,
take the
yeah, absolutely. Our next one is, how has your time been working in the games industry since that sort of first stepping stone, and in working with so many great companies? Sort of how has your experience differed between those companies?
For sure. Definitely has differed quite a bit between the different companies that I've been at. I've had, a really, I think, unique privilege of being able to be exposed to, kind of all levels of company sizes. I would say like Tespa, while it was a part of Blizzard Entertainment, was a pretty like, pretty small team, and it felt a lot of times like a startup. And then Kabam, we're like a mid-sized publisher, and our marketing department is relatively small. And then EA is like this massive behemoth that like, there are so many different layers to it and so many different studios and so many, people that work there. It was a really different environment in all of those places. But overall, my experience within gaming has been incredibly positive. I think because gaming is so competitive to get into, the people that you work with, generally speaking, are like passionate and hardworking. And I also think that there's a lot of opportunity to be challenged and to grow really rapidly if you're a person that is able to take advantage of that. So I've loved working games, even if at times like it can be easy to lose sight of the fact that like, hey, I work in games. This is super exciting when it becomes your everyday. But yeah, it's been great.
any cool like anecdotes, perks, or your favorite parts of maybe working with the 3 different companies, organizations?
For sure. I think, starting with Tespa was such an amazing experience because I got to go to work every single day and help other students who are just like me, like make their campus dreams come true. Like that was such a cool experience of like, hey, I get to, help these other students solve problems that they're having. I get to help them run events. I get to, you know, for example, I was able to attend a retreat in California at Blizzard as a part of a leadership program that they offered. And then 2 years later, I got to come and run that program. So that like full circle moment was so fulfilling, and still to this day is like one of the greatest highlights for me in terms of memories. So Tespa was really great for that reason, like that startup, really passionate and fulfilling environment. Kabam has been really great because Kabam is large enough in the sense that what you're working with, like the resources that you have are so much more than what we had at Tespo in the startup environment. So you get to do a lot more cool stuff. And in addition to that, with a smaller team, you still have the ability to make a lot of change and still have a lot of impact. which has been really great. And, working at a studio that's based in Vancouver where I can meet with my colleagues and, talk about things has been really, really nice. And having that sense of community here in the city has been awesome. And then for electronic arts, like that's where you get to the point where as a kid, like I remember sitting and watching E3 and seeing EA come on, and like, I still vividly remember Star Wars The Old Republic when that was first announced. That original cinematic like changed my life. It was like this is so cool. So to be able to work at that level of a game publisher was so, I think, eye-opening for me to really see like, wow, this is like what can really be done at this scale. And that was a really awesome experience as well, to just like feel like, hey, like I finally made it to a quote unquote like huge name. So that was a really fulfilling moment as well.
That's wonderful. Yeah, some great insights and really exciting. I'm also curious how might you recommend somebody get their foot in the door at some of these companies like EA, or Blizzard, or Kabam?
For sure. So I think that the advice will differ depending on where people are located, right? Like if you happen to live near a gaming hub that like, so say like LA or New York, I think that there's or even Seattle, like I think there's a lot more opportunity for students in those areas to get involved at an earlier level. But in general, I will say the biggest piece of advice that I can give students trying to break into the game industry is to, one, develop transferable skills, right? I'm sure a lot of people have said that. I'm sure a lot of people will continue to say that, but like you might not get your first job in gaming, but there's skills that you can take from other jobs and transfer into the industry. Two, especially for people working in marketing, I would focus on being a problem solver. If you are specifically interested in being a product marketing manager, we deal with a ton of different disciplines. I work with the game team, I work with graphic designers, I work with social media managers, I work with upper management. So approaching everything with a big picture lens, but not forgetting like the actual problems that you're trying to solve will go a long way. And those are skills that can be developed at every job, right? So what you say you are working a high school job, right? So maybe you're working retail or something like that, looking for problems in your workplace and working with your manager to like help solve those problems. There's great ways to build those skills that can help you later in the gaming industry. And all of those things, getting involved at the volunteer level, networking, meeting with other, students that are passionate, are all great ways because, for my time at Tespa, a lot of those people that were involved in the collegiate scene are now working in the industry. So that I now have like this network of people that we all started as these really passionate students, but we've all spread out amongst all these different things. So networks are really great for that. So participating as much as you can be a great way to get ahead.
And just to back that up also, from working with CEOs and department leaders, they don't want you to bring problems to them. They want you to bring solutions.
100%. Yeah. And thinking things through, right? Like I think like, if you're able to identify a risk or a problem that might pop up before anybody else, and you not only can say, hey, here's the problem, if you can say, hey, I found this problem and I solved it by the time that you even bring it up to your manager, it's a huge win and something that you should be really proud of and should strive to do wherever you can.
That's awesome. We'll jump into our next question here. Can you tell us a little bit about just the day-to-day as a product marketing manager at Kabam? Like, what do you typically do in a day's work?
Yeah, for sure. So, our day-to-day is quite different. We deal with a bunch of different, different teams. So again, like a typical day might start with a review of, okay, where are we at in our current campaign, right? So for example, if we're, preparing for a major marketing beat, so maybe there's a big update for a game that's coming, we're going to review with, okay, where are we at? Are there assets or are there like, say, social media graphics that are in production? I'm going to check in with those to make sure what's going on there. I might get asked by, somebody who works in ad marketing that they need someone to help them write copy and to proofread and review assets. That's another thing that might happen. Or I might have a meeting with the game team and I might have to review some of their upcoming content and provide my feedback on that. The big thing to, I think, take away from the day-to-day of a product marketing manager is that no day is ever really going to be the same. which is both exciting, but also can be challenging, because a lot of the times you're going to be switching between a bunch of different hats around, like, okay, in this meeting, I need to be thinking about this thing. In this meeting, I need to be thinking about this thing. But all the time, I need to be thinking about everything. So I think that can kind of sum up, in general, the type of stuff that we do. In terms of like I guess the stuff that we actually create. So if like to put it into the context of what we actually will walk away at the end of the day with. So figuring out core strategy for a game. So things like doing market research on target audiences for what we want to propose to the game team for like who they should be going after. That's part of our job. Doing things like developing the overall campaign plan, which will involve, okay, what are the major beats, right? So if we were doing a game announcement, we might do, okay, we're going to announce as a part of Summer Game Fest, and then we're going to have a follow-up beat the next month that's going to be focused on, say like the first time you get to see gameplay. So we're going to, build out a gameplay trailer. So like those kind of like planning is a lot of what we do as well. But yeah, it's kind of a difficult role to establish like, hey, here's what I do every day, because it's not like, for say like a graphic designer where they'll, produce assets. We kind of get involved in everything.
Sounds
Yeah.
like flexibility is the name of the game.
Yeah, being flexible and change management is another good word that we like to use, right? Being able to react to, conditions of like, hey, this asset that you thought, this piece of content that you thought was going to arrive on this day isn't going to arrive in time. So how are you going to shift the plan? That's a lot of our job as well, is reacting to whatever the day brings, really.
I was going to say, because no matter as much as you prepare and try to create things proactively, things will come up that are unexpected. And that's just the reality of working in marketing.
100%. Pivoting constantly. Because really, I think a good way of describing it is like, if you think of game development as like a pipeline, right? Or as like a road, right? The game team is further up the road. So they're able to make changes and they have a lot more time to react before they get to the end of the road. Versus marketing, like we can only really start our work once the game team has gotten things into a solid state. So for every delay or every change or every like adjustment that they make, we have to be ready to react like that, because we don't have a lot of road left before we have to like get things in front of players. So that's another good way of looking at like our role within the game development process.
It makes a lot of sense.
One of the questions I had, Robert, was I think you mentioned that right now you're working on Shop Titans, but in general, you have to keep in mind sort of all the games and everything that's going on. Is it typically that you are focusing in on just like one game at a time, or are you are you responsible for the marketing across all the games? And actually, it's funny that you're working on Shop Titans right now, because that was actually the one game prior to have knowing you that I had played before. So your marketing is working.
Nice. That's awesome to hear. Yeah, I mean, so it'll change from company to company. Speaking for Kabam, we're responsible for the non-IP titles. So IP stands for intellectual property, for those that don't know. So for example, we have Marvel Contest of Champions, which is a Marvel fighting game on mobile, as well as Disney Mirrorverse. Those are IP titles, right? So the teams that work on those games work with, Marvel and Disney as a part of their marketing plans, versus my team, where we just work with non-IP games. So we're working on King Arthur's Legends Rise as well as Shop Titans, where we kind of just focus on that category of title within Kabam. Right now, our team is relatively small. So what that means is that I'm doing double duty. So I'm working on both games at this time. But it will change. So for example, like Contest of Champions, they have dedicated product marketing staff that like work specifically on that title and don't work on Disney Mirrorverse, for example.
And would you say there's like any differences that we might not be thinking of when it comes to product marketing in gaming and product marketing in, anything else, skincare, fast food, etc.?
Yeah, I think the biggest thing is passion. Like, customers for when I was working at for the Vancouver Titans and the Seattle Surge, I was working in partnership marketing. So I was working with like sponsors, right? So if you've seen any type of content for esports before, there's probably a sponsor on that video. So I would work with those sponsors to try and like come up with marketing ideas, etc. And you would meet with these people who are marketing for say like a pizza company, right? And that's their day in and day out. When they're thinking about their customers, they're thinking about the fact like, if they get a bad pizza, it might be kind of unfortunate for them, but it's not going to be that big a deal. Working in gaming, like players are so passionate about the product that you're creating for them that they are going to be not only just like very reactive to negative experiences, but they're also going to be hyper vigilant, right? A lot of times they're looking for what's wrong in a lot of ways. So understanding that and being able to kind of like separate yourself, like for example, if there is a negative experience that happens or something goes wrong, being able to take a step back from social media and walk away from it was definitely a skill I had to learn, because it's very different working in gaming than say skincare, for example, or pizza as another example.
I was going to add that gamers are probably also more vocal than some other demographics, so they're not afraid to really put it out there, really tell you how they feel.
Yeah,
both
and
vigilant and vocal.
Correct. And it's a double-edged sword, right? Like, I mean, they're only being vocal because they care, and that is something that will always be great. The fact that they're willing to stick around and to tell you how they feel about the game that you're working on is something that we definitely don't take for granted.
Awesome. Well, with our next question, we're actually taking a little bit of a step back to some of the advice that you might have for students that are looking to enter the field. So, Richie, I'm sorry, I think I stole your question, but what should students focus on to pursue a career in game or esports marketing?
For sure. So I think I kind of touched on it already in terms of like transferable skills, I think are good. Focusing on being a problem solver are also good. But I think the big thing is, I think it's twofold. So one, the first thing that I would say is have an honest conversation with yourself about what it is that you enjoy doing. So one of the things that I wish I had done earlier in my career is like, even before I worked in games, like when I was working high school jobs, I wish I had taken the time to sit down and write out, what is it about this job that I have that I like really, really like? And what are these things that I really, really don't like, right? And separate it from the context of the job that you're in. So for example, I used to prune trees in the summer, like apple trees. I used to work on an apple orchard and go out there and, trim trees. And one of the things that I really, really liked about that job was at the end of the day, I could look back and I could see how many trees I had pruned. And that gave me a sense of accomplishment, right? And now that I work in this current job, I don't have that same kind of like fulfillment loop, because what we do every day, it just kind of keeps going, right? Like it's this treadmill where it's like you might work all day and you might look back at your day and being like, what did I really accomplish today? And it's like, not a whole lot. Like you didn't get to move the needle in a lot of ways. So my first recommendation to students who are looking to like plan out their career is identify those things for you. What are the things that you really enjoy about your work? And then you can take that and use it as criteria to help you figure out what kind of job might work best for you in gaming, right? Because like when we talk about game marketing, there's a product marketing manager, but there's also social media managers. There's also graphic designers that contribute to that. You have video editors, you have community managers, you have all of these different people, like project managers, for example, all these different kind of people that work in this field. So understanding what you would like to get out of work every day, then you can use that as like criteria to decide where you want to go. And then after that, developing transferable skills, getting involved, all of those things are great steps that you can take to like break into this industry and build a career.
That makes a lot of sense, and that's great advice. And Robert, in your expertise, do you see anything evolving in terms of marketing within the esports industry, sort of where it's going?
Yeah, for sure. So I'm just speaking for myself here. Like I can't speak for anybody else, but from my experience, with the rise of you know organic social media in terms of like TikTok, right? Like the ability to, for anyone to kind of go viral in a moment. I think the content of a game is becoming increasingly more important than the marketing that you put out, right? Like, so earlier I spoke back to the Star Wars: The Old Republic cinematic that came out, right? Like that was like the first piece of content that we saw for that game, and it was this massive cinematic piece that cost, I'm sure, BioWare a massive amount of money to produce that. And in today's market, like you're seeing a shift where, more and more people could just go viral on TikTok if your game is, compelling enough, right? And you're seeing less investment in cinematics, for example, and more investment in like gameplay trailers. So like the content of the game is becoming more important, which means that our job as marketers is less about setting up these major moments and instead finding ways to make sure that the fun parts of our game shine through all the noise and are highlighted in the best way possible. So I think a shift to more gameplay focused content and the ability to think in that way rather than thinking of like these beautiful cinematic pieces is a shift that we're seeing in marketing.
That makes a lot of sense. And those looking to get involved should definitely keep that in mind. And Peter, since you stole this question, I might grab the next one from you, which is, Robert, why do you think schools today, K-12 and beyond, should support their students' love for gaming or esports?
Oh, yeah, 100%. I mean, there's so many reasons. I think for me, and from the experience that I've had, working with students, there are so many beneficial skills and educational opportunities that students can get from participating in a community over a shared passion, right? And as a society, for right or wrong, we seem to judge some passions as acceptable and admirable and some as negative that should be discouraged. And I think it's really important that schools reevaluate the way that they look at gaming and see it as an opportunity to connect with students and provide students who might not be as willing or able to participate in, say, other extracurricular activities. They should see this as an opportunity to connect with those students and give them an opportunity to develop those same skills. I think that, gamers are going to game, so it's about trying to get as much benefit from gaming as possible, because it's going to happen either way, right? Kids are going to talk about it at lunch. Let's give them a place where they can develop it at school and like get some educational outcomes out of this, especially as our company or as our world becomes more and more digital. I think that there's a lot of great opportunities out there if schools are willing and able to support it.
It's very well put. Do you have any thoughts or ideas on how schools and school leaders can do that, can support their students' love for gaming?
For sure. So I think that there's a couple of there. I think if you think of it as two arms, right? You think of the competitive arm. So in terms of like esports, there's a lot of great opportunities for students to gain a lot of the similar skills that they would get from, say, playing on a soccer team or playing on a baseball team, etc. And I think that's one way that you can look at it, making sure that there are teams available at your school, keeping an open mind about games, especially games like Valorant, for example, which I understand guns can be, a sensitive topic, but, keeping an open mind and meeting kids where they are can be really, really positive for their development. And then on the other side of things, I think, community and specifically content education can also be a really great way that games can step up. For example, Ubisoft, for their title Assassin's Creed, they offer things like the Discovery Tour, which is an in-game educational module where you can kind of like go back in time and visit ancient Greece and visit Egypt, or the Viking Age, for example. And those are really like lower lift opportunities to get kids involved, even if they aren't necessarily gamers, with gaming. And then, more webinars like this, more opportunities to learn more about the world of gaming, to show that, hey, this is a career path that's out there, it's viable. And it's a great way to, earn a living and to be fulfilled at work.
Very well put. And luckily enough, I think we are seeing, earlier when you spoke about that there was an absence of that institutional support, I think we are seeing a lot more support from the colleges, from the school campuses, to support their students' passion and kind of meet them where they are, like you were talking about.
Yeah, it's been really cool. I mean, I know like when we started Tespa Carleton or Carleton Esports, at that time in college esports, like the big dream was getting a space on campus. And for a lot of students, it's still that. And happy to say that Carleton University, for example, now does have a gaming, space on campus where their teams can practice and get together. And that's so cool to see that kind of progress over the years, and at the high school level as well. Like my partner is a teacher, so I was visiting their school the other day and walking around and seeing a poster for like the Valorant team and like how they're like meeting for practices, like blew my mind. It was so cool to see, like, I don't know, that kids now have the opportunity to like participate in that at school and be supported by like adults in their life is so cool. So it's been really great.
And it's not just like we've talked about sort of the skills from a player perspective in a community sense. Like there's so many of these different orbital careers that students can explore and learn skills in, from something that they're passionate about and want to do, and they're getting hands-on experience in, which is really, really cool.
Yeah, we need accountants, we need lawyers, we need everybody, right? There are so many different careers that help make a gaming company run. So there's a ton of opportunities out there for students to engage with what they're passionate about.
And that's one of our foremost goals with this series of webinars, is to show students and young people everywhere is that, hey, if you love gaming, you don't just have to be a player or a coach. You can go into operations, you can go into contract law and partnerships, you can go into brand marketing. There is a way for you to pursue your passion, and make a living doing it.
For
Absolutely. Sure. But unfortunately, I think that being said, we are out of time here. We want to thank everyone for attending today. Robert, a huge thank you to you for being our panelist today and sharing your experience with our students and educators. I know they will appreciate it.
Awesome. Well, thanks for having me, guys. Anytime.
Thank you again. And I think that is going to conclude our webinar here today. So thank you, Robert. Thank you for those who are watching. Stay safe and happy gaming.